Greetings for another day of Srimad Bhagavatam. Today we'll be reading from the first canto, chapter 15, entitled The Pandavas Retire Timely. There's a beautiful benediction at the end of this chapter, so I hope you enjoy the narration. Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurum militam jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Radhikaye Priyatmane Sri Srimad Bhakti Vedanta Narayaniti Namine. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraya Nastapraishu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavatu Tamashloke Bhakti Bhagavati Naistiki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. May the Supreme Lord be pleased with this narration. I'll read the first verse in Sanskrit. Sutta uvacha evam Krishna saka Krishno bhratra ragya vikalpitaha nana sankaspadam rupam Krishna vishlesha karshitaha. Sutta Goswami said, Arjuna, the celebrated friend of Lord Krishna, was grief-stricken because of his strong feeling of separation from Krishna. Over and above all Maharaj Yudhishthira's speculative inquiries. Due to grief, Arjuna's mouth and lotus-like heart had dried up. Therefore his body lost all luster. Now, remembering the Supreme Lord, he could hardly utter a word in reply. So as we know from the previous chapter, Arjuna has returned from Dwarka to Hastinapur, and he's meeting again with King Yudhishthira. Arjuna has been gone for 7 months. He wanted to find out what was Krishna's program. And there he found out the demise of the entire Vishnu dynasty and the passing of Lord Krishna. So now he's returning to Hastinapur completely heartbroken and grief-stricken. And he's going to tell Maharaj Yudhishthira what he discovered. With great difficulty, he checked the tears of grief that smeared his eyes. He was very distressed because Lord Krishna was out of sight. And he increasingly felt affection for him. Remembering Lord Krishna and his well wishes, benefactions, intimate familial relations, and his chariot driving, Arjuna, overwhelmed and breathing very heavily, began to speak. Arjuna said, O King, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who treated me exactly like an intimate friend, has left me. Thus, my astounding power, which astonished even the demigods, is no longer with me. I have just lost him, whose separation for a moment would render all the universes unfavorable and void, like bodies without life. Only by his merciful strength was I able to vanquish all the lusty princes assembled at the palace of King Drupad for the selection of the bridegroom. With my bow and arrow I could pierce the fish target and thereby gain the hand of Draupadi. So Arjuna is narrating the story how he won the hand of Draupadi by piercing the fish that was hanging in the ceiling, covered by a wheel. And Arjuna had to look in a pot of water, looking down, and by looking at the reflection, shoot the fish. So many princes tried to accomplish it, but could not. But Arjuna was able to do it. Even Karna was present. Karna could have done it, but Draupadi said that only somebody above a Kshatriya could take part in the competition. And even though, in actuality, Karna was the brother of Arjuna, but they didn't know that. So, because Karna was a Sudra, he was raised by a carpenter, he was not allowed to take part in the competition. So Arjuna is remembering that only because of Lord Krishna's grace was he able to win this competition and win the hand of Draupadi. Because he was near me, it was possible for me to conquer with great dexterity the powerful king of heaven, Indradev, along with his demigod associates, and thus enable the fire god to devastate the Pandava forest. And only by his grace was the demon named Maya saved from the blazing Pandava forest, and thus we could build our assembly house of wonderful architectural workmanship, where all the princes assembled during the performance of Rajasuya Yagna and paid you tributes. Your respectable younger brother, who possesses the strength of 10,000 elephants, killed by his grace Jarasandha, whose feet were worshipped by many kings. These kings had been brought for sacrifice in Jarasandha's Mahabhairava Yagna, but they were thus released. Later they paid tribute to your majesty. Srila Prabhupada in the purport describes the story of Bhim killing Jarasandha with the help of Krishna. Jarasandha was, when he was born, he was in two pieces. So his parents tossed him. But the demon Jara was able to put him back together. And so he became known as Jarasandha. So during the battle between Bhim and Jarasandha, Krishna reminded him that his weakness was there, where he was joined. Or I guess maybe it was here. I don't know how and which half they put him together, whether it was two pieces this way or two pieces this way. It was he only who loosened the hair of all the wives of the miscreants who dared open the cluster of your queen's hair, which had been nicely dressed and sanctified for the great Rajasuya sacrificial ceremony. At that time she fell down at the feet of Lord Krishna with tears in her eyes. So we know the famous story of how King Yudhishthira, his one weakness was gambling, and how he lost Queen Draupadi in the gambling match. So the many kings tried to dishonor Draupadi in many ways by pulling off her clothes, but Krishna, because she cried out, "Hey Govinda," and fell at the feet of the Lord, Krishna supplied her unlimited cloth, so she could not be disrobed. During our exile, Durvas Muni, who eats with his 10,000 disciples, intrigued with our enemies to put us in dangerous trouble, At that time, he, Lord Krishna, simply by accepting the remnants of food, saved us. By his accepting food, thus, the assembly of Munis, while bathing in the river, felt sumptuously fed, and all the three worlds were also sanctified. So, Durvas Muni, who's a partial expansion of Lord Shiva, he's a great rishi. And on the request of, I think it was Duryodhan, he went to see the Pandavas while they were in exile. And Durvas is known to have 10,000 disciples. So he was traveling, maybe not with all of them, but with some of them. And he went to visit the Pandavas. Now, Draupadi, she had received a pot from the sun god, that this pot could feed unlimited people, as long as she had not taken anything, as long as she had not eaten from this pot could continuously supply food. So Duryodhan sent Durvas to see the Pandavas in exile after the time of lunch, and Draupadi had already eaten. So Durvas arrives on the scene. So Yudhishthir said, "Oh, please go take bath and we'll prepare food." So they were in great anxiety, wondering how are they going to satisfy Durvas and all his disciples. So just then Krishna comes again to save the day. And Krishna said, "Is there anything in the pot?" And Draupadi said, "No, there's nothing in the pot." He said, "Check. See if there's even one speck." So there was one speck of vegetable left in the pot. So Krishna ate it. And in this way, because Krishna became satisfied, all the Durvas and all his disciples immediately felt like they were sumptuously fed. And rather than go back and not be able to eat because they had no appetite, they left. So in this way, the Pandavas and Draupadi were saved by the grace of the Lord. It was by his influence only that in a fight I was able to astonish the personality of God, Lord Shiva, and his wife, the daughter of Mount Himalaya. Thus he, Lord Shiva, became pleased with me and awarded me his own weapon. Other demigods also delivered their respective weapons to me, and in addition I was able to reach the heavenly planets in this present body and was allowed a half-elevated seat. So by the grace of Lord Krishna, Arjuna even received one of Lord Shiva's weapons, and also he got to visit Indra in the heavens in his very self-human body. When I stayed for some time as a guest in the heavenly planets, all the heavenly demigods, including King Indradev, took shelter of my arms, which were marked with the Gandiva bow, to kill the demon named Nevata Kavach. O King, descendant of Ajamid, at the present moment I am bereft of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose influence I was so powerful. Text 14. The military strength of the Kauravas was like an ocean in which there dwelled many invincible existences, and thus it was insurmountable. But because of his friendship, I, seated on the chariot, was able to cross over it. And only by his grace was I able to regain the cows and also collect by force many helmets of the kings, which were bedecked with jewels that were sources of all brilliance. It was he only who withdrew the duration of life from everyone, and who, in the battlefield, withdrew the speculative power and strength of enthusiasm for the great military phalanx made by the Kauravas headed by Bhishma, Karna, Drona, Shalya, etc. Their arrangement was expert and more than adequate. But he, Lord Sri Krishna, while going forward, did all this. So, materially speaking, it was not possible for the Pandavas, for Arjuna and the Pandavas to defeat the Kauravas. It was only because Lord Krishna was on their side, and ultimately Lord Krishna wanted the war to happen and wanted to establish Yudhishthir as king, that he made all arrangements for the victory of the Pandavas. Great generals like Bhishma, Drona, Karna, Bhurishrava, Shusharma, Shalya, Jayadrath, Bahilika, all directed their invincible weapons against me. But by his, Lord Krishna's grace, they could not even touch a hair on my head. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj, the supreme devotee of Lord Nrsimhadev, was unaffected by the weapons the demons used against him. So here Arjuna is giving the example of Prahlad, the great devotee Prahlad, who was protected by the Lord in so many ways from the hands of his evil father, Hiranyakashipu. It was by his mercy only that my enemies neglected to kill me when I descended from my chariot to get water for my thirsty horses. And it was due to my lack of esteem for my Lord that I dared engage him as my chariot driver. For he is worshipped and offered services by the best men to attain salvation. I would encourage all of you, I'm not reading the purports, but within each purport there's so much transcendental knowledge and information on the history and on instructions on Bhakti Yoga. So if you have time, I would suggest getting these books and reading further. O King, his jokings and frank talks were pleasing and beautifully decorated with smiles. His addresses unto me as, O son of Pritha, O friend, O son of the Kuru dynasty, and all such heartiness are now remembered by me, and thus I am overwhelmed. Generally, both of us used to live together and sleep, sit, and loiter together. And at the time of advertising oneself for acts of chivalry, sometimes, if there were any irregularity, I used to reproach him by saying, "My friend, you are so very truthful." Even in those hours when his value was minimized, he, being the Supreme Soul, used to tolerate all those utterings of mine, excusing me exactly as a true friend excuses his true friend, or a father excuses his son. So Arjuna and Krishna had a very sweet relationship. As it's stated here, they used to sit on the same couch in bed, take food together. They'd have a very friendly relations. And sometimes even Arjuna would joke and sarcastically say things to Krishna. Krishna would tolerate all of that because of their loving friendship. O Emperor, now I am separated from my friend and dearmost well-wisher, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and therefore my heart appears to be void of everything. In his absence, I had been defeated by a number of infidel cowherd men, while I was guarding the bodies of all the wives of Krishna. So we know when Krishna left, Arjuna was there to sort of pick up the pieces, to hold everything together, and to be a stable voice and a stable presence for all of Krishna's family members. So during this time, Arjuna lost a scuffle with some inferior cowherd men. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada explains how that was even possible, because truly it was not possible. I'll read the purport. It says, the important point in this verse is how it was possible that Arjuna could be defeated by a gang of ignoble cowherd men, and how such mundane cowherd men could touch the bodies of the wives of Lord Krishna, who were under the protection of Arjuna. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has justified the contradiction by research in the Vishnu Purana and Brahma Purana. In these Puranas it is said that once the fair denizens of heaven pleased Ashtavakra Muni by their service and were blessed by the Muni to have the Supreme Lord as their husband. Ashtavakra Muni was curved in 8 joints of his body, and thus he used to move in a particular curved manner. The daughters of the demigods could not check their laughter upon seeing the movements of the Muni, and the Muni, being angry at them, cursed them that they would be kidnapped by rogues, even if they would get the Lord as their husband. So here we see the Muni who gave them the ability to have the Lord as their husband, again cursed them that even if the Lord was their husband, they would still be kidnapped. So we see ordinarily Arjuna would have been able to easily defeat these rogues, but because these wives had been cursed by the Muni, this pastime had to take place. We see this in the Lord's pastimes so many times, that so many difficulties are given to the bhakta, to the devotee. But this is all ordained by the Lord, sometimes because of some previous curse or some previous pastime. Later on, the girls again satisfied the Muni by their prayers, and the Muni blessed them that they would regain their husbands even after being robbed by the rogues. So, in order to keep the words of the great Muni, the Lord himself kidnapped his wives from the protection of Arjuna. So it was the Lord himself who came and kidnapped the wives. Otherwise, they would have at once vanished from the scene as soon as they were touched by the rogues. Besides that, some of the gopis who prayed to become wives of the Lord returned to their respective positions after their desire was fulfilled. After the departure of Lord Krishna, he wanted all his entourage back to Godhead, and they were called back under different conditions only. Text 21. I have the very same Gandiva bow, the same arrows, the same chariot drawn by the same horses, and I used them as the same Arjuna, to whom all the kings offered their due respects. But in the absence of Lord Krishna, all of them, at a moment's notice, have become null and void. It is exactly like offering clarified butter on ashes, accumulating money with a magic wand, or sowing seeds on barren land. O king, since you have asked me about our friends and relatives in the city of Dwarka, I will inform you that all of them were cursed by the Brahmanas, and as a result they all became intoxicated with wine made of putrefied rice, and fought among themselves with sticks, not even recognizing one another. Now, all but 4 or 5 of them are dead and gone. So again, by the arrangement of the Lord, all of Krishna's family, one day, because of drinking wine and becoming intoxicated, they had a big fight and killed them all. They all killed each other. Factually, this is all due to the supreme will of the Lord, the personality of Godhead. Sometimes people kill one another, and at other times they protect one another. O king, as in the ocean, the bigger and stronger aquatics swallow up the smaller and weaker ones, so also the Supreme Personality of Godhead, to lighten the burden of the earth, has engaged the stronger Yadu to kill the weaker, and the bigger Yadu to kill the smaller. Krishna says, "Time I am, destroyer of the worlds." Prabhupada says in the purport, in the material world, the struggle for existence and survival of the fittest are laws, because in the material world there is disparity between conditioned souls due to everyone's desire to lord it over the material resources. Now I am attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the Personality of Godhead, Govinda, because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning heart in all circumstances of time and space. So now Arjuna is remembering those wonderful instructions that were imparted to him by Sri Krishna before the battle took place, known as Sri Bhagavad Gita. Arjuna is remembering all those instructions that Krishna gave him. Sutta Goswami said, thus, being deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord, which were imparted in the great intimacy of friendship, and in thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pacified and free from all material contamination. Arjuna's constant remembrance of the lotus feet of Lord Sri Krishna repeatedly increased his devotion, and as a result, all the trash in his thoughts subsided. Because of the Lord's pastimes and activities, and because of his absence, it appeared that Arjuna forgot the instructions left by the Personality of Godhead. But factually, this was not the case, and again he became lord of his senses. Because of his possessing spiritual assets, the doubts of duality were completely cut off. Thus he was freed from the three modes of material nature and placed in transcendence. There was no longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth and death, for he was freed from material form. Upon hearing of Lord Krishna's returning to his abode, and upon understanding the end of the Yadu dynasty's earthly manifestation, Maharaj Yudhishthira decided to go back home, back to Godhead. Kunti, after overhearing Arjuna's telling of the end of the Yadu dynasty and disappearance of Lord Krishna, engaged in the devotional service of the Transcendental Personality of Godhead with full attention, and thus gained release from the course of material existence. The Supreme Unborn, Lord Sri Krishna, caused the members of the Yadu dynasty to relinquish their bodies, and thus he relieved the burden of the world. This action was like picking out a thorn with a thorn, though both are the same to the controller. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur suggests that the rishis, like Shaunaka and others who were hearing Srimad Bhagavatam from Sutta Goswami at Naimisharanya, were not happy to hear about the Yadus dying in the madness of intoxication. To give them relief from this mental agony, Sutta Goswami assured them that the Lord caused the members of the Yadu dynasty to relinquish their bodies, by which they had to take away the burden of the world. The Lord and his eternal associates appeared on earth to help the administrative demigods in eradicating the burden of the world. He therefore called for some of the confidential demigods to appear in the Yadu family and serve him in his great mission. After the mission was fulfilled, the demigods, by the will of the Lord, relinquished their corporeal bodies by fighting amongst themselves in the madness of intoxication. The demigods are accustomed to drinking the somaras beverage, and therefore the drinking of wine and intoxication are not unknown to them. Sometimes they were put into trouble for indulging in intoxication. So, I'll continue. Once the sons of Kuvera fell in the wrath of Narada for being intoxicated, but afterwards they regained their original forms by the grace of Lord Sri Krishna. The Supreme Lord, text 35, the Supreme Lord relinquished the body which he manifested to diminish the burden of the earth. Just like a magician, he relinquished one body to accept different ones, like the fish incarnation and others. When the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet in his self-same form, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge. Maharaj Yudhishthira was intelligent enough to understand the influence of the age of Kali, characterized by increasing avarice, falsehood, cheating, and violence throughout the capital state, home, and among individuals. So he wisely prepared himself to leave home, and he dressed accordingly. Thereafter, in the capital of Hastinapur, he enthroned his grandson, who was trained and equally qualified as the emperor and master of all land bordered by the seas. That grandson is Maharaj Parikshit. Then he posted Vajra, the son of Aniruddha, grandson of Lord Krishna, at Mathura, as the king of Shurasen. Afterwards, Maharaj Yudhishthira performed a Prajapatya sacrifice and placed in himself the fire for quitting household life. Maharaj Yudhishthira at once relinquished all his garments, belt, and ornaments of the royal order, and became completely disinterested and unattached to everything. Then he amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence unto the embodiment of the 5 elements, and his body unto death. Then, as pure self, he became free from the material conception of life. Thus annihilating the gross body of the 5 elements unto the 3 qualitative modes of material nature, he merged them in one nescience, and then absorbed that nescience in the self, Brahman, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances. After that, Maharaj Yudhishthira dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid food, voluntarily became dumb, and let his hair hang loose. All this combined to make him look like a madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, and just like a deaf man, he heard nothing. He then started toward the north, treading the path accepted by his forefathers and great men, to devote himself completely to the thought of the personality of Godhead, and he lived in that way wherever he went. The younger brothers of Maharaj Yudhishthira observed that the age of Kali had already arrived throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother. They all have performed all the principles of religion, and as a result, rightly decided that the lotus feet of the Lord are the supreme goal of all. They meditated upon his lotus feet without interruption. Thus, by pure consciousness, due to constant devotional remembrance, they attain the spiritual sky, which is ruled over by the Supreme Narayan, Lord Krishna. This is attained only by those who meditate upon the one Supreme Lord without deviation. This abode of the Lord, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life. But the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attain that abode in their very same bodies. Vidura, while on pilgrimage, left his body at Prabhas. Because he was absorbed in thought of Krishna, he was received by the denizens of the Pitriloka planet, where he returned to his original post. His original post as Yamaraj. He went to Pitriloka. Draupadi also saw that her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. So both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands. So now the last verse. I'll read the Sanskrit. Ya shraddhayaitar bhagavat priyanam pando sutanam iti samprayanam shrinot alam swastya yanam pavitram labdva haro bhaktim upaiti siddhim. The subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life is fully auspicious and is perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfectional life. Purport. Srimad Bhagavatam is a narration about the personality of Godhead and the devotees of the Lord, like the Pandavas. The narration of the personality of Godhead and his devotees is absolute in itself, and thus to hear it with a devotional attitude is to associate with the Lord and constant companions of the Lord. By the process of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, one can attain the highest perfection of life, namely going back home, back to Godhead, without failure. Thank you for listening. Let's have a little kirtan. This is Rag Madmad Sarang. Hari Prasad Chaurasiya and Pandit Jasaraj. Pandit Jasaraj and Ustad. Anyway. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Gurudev, Jai Gurudev, Jai Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Nita Gaur Hari Bo, Gaur Hari Bo, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Jaya Radhe, Jaya Krishna, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol. Gaur Premanande, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.